The year is 1582. Japan appears as a fractured nation that burns under the weight of ambition and betrayal. I've been waiting for such an Assassin's Creed concept for probably more than 10 years. An Assassin's Creed experience delving into the Warring States period, or Sengoku Jidai in Japanese, a century of chaos wrought with war, steel, and gunpowder. Daimyos clash for dominance. Shinobi is trying to balance the scales of power, and the blood of the innocent, the guilty, stains the earth without any difference. Right in the middle of this, Assassin's Creed Shadows chooses to tell its story, which I've been speculating on for years. I was expecting to play as the infamous Hattori Hanzo or one of his disciples from the Iga Clan, but Shadows decides to present this turmoil through two contrasting figures. A foreign samurai who rose from mystery, and a shinobi whose clan was crushed under Oda Nobunaga's ambition. I'm Arcadenaut here, and today we are diving headfirst into the real history and how Assassin's Creed Shadows portrays the story of a broken Japan. Starting from the Warring States period to Oda Nobunaga's ambition, the betrayal at Honno-ji, this period of history is full of Iga's ninja clans, Portuguese missionaries, and important figures. So if you are ready, then let's delve deeper into how Assassin's Creed Shadows portrays the actual Japanese history. The Sengoku Jidai, or Warring States period, wasn't just a time of conflict. It also laid the seeds of revolution in the very essence of Japan itself. From the mid-15th century to the early 17th century, the country was already filled with different clans governing different regions, power-hungry retainers, rebellious lords, and bloodshed. The samurai were no longer merely noble protectors, but they were also ruthless agents of power, sometimes bound to their lords or sometimes as ronins. As samurai without a lord, offering their service to whoever pays them. Amongst all of these figures, we also have the daimyo, the feudal lords, acting as kings of their region, seeking to carve their names in history with gold. However, before that, Japan was ruled under the Ashikaga shogunate, holding Japan together under the Muromachi Bakufu. The era of peace and serenity ended with the Onin War, a civil war in Kyoto that collapsed central authority under the Ashikaga shogunate, and what followed this war led to more chaos. With the Muromachi government growing weak, their shoguns had become puppets, and the country fractured into dozens of semi-independent domains ruled by powerful warlords, the daimyo. With each daimyo rising into power and clashing for their own clan, their own ideals and rule, Japan has turned into a free-for-all battlefield. And it's this turbulent period that Assassin's Creed Shadows dives into, capturing the chaos and the ambition of daimyo perfectly. Instead of focusing solely on a lone hero or a single dynasty, Shadows present a tale woven between two contrasting characters. A foreign samurai rising from obscurity, Yasuke, and a shinobi from the Iga Clan, Naoe, whose entire world was destroyed by Oda Nobunaga's relentless expansion. And Assassin's Creed Shadows doesn't shy away from this madness, but it embraces it. The dynamic between Yasuke, an infamous foreign samurai who became one of the retainers and samurai of Oda Nobunaga, and the Iga Clan's one of the last living shinobi, Naoe, they reflect the feelings of vengeance and as well as the duality of Sengoku Jidai itself. Honor and deceit, tradition and change. One tries to honor his lord while the other strives to have her vengeance and cleanse Japan from a bigger corruption and deceit. And at the middle, the man who bound these two together, Oda Nobunaga, also called the first shogun or the Demon King. As the second son of a minor daimyo family based in Owari province, Oda Nobunaga wasn't like the others. Nicknamed as the Fool of Owari, in his youth for his unconventional behavior, Oda Nobunaga was destined to change Japan. From his youth, it stated that he used to ride horses without any formal dress, mixing with peasants, and defying social norms. Following the death of his father, Nobunaga quickly eliminated his own relatives and grasped the full power in Owari, making his ruthless ambition a reality with each step. As he used tactics that no other daimyo dared to use, that's also the time when we first see the influence of foreign presence in Japan, with Portuguese traders and first Jesuits. The arrival of foreign trade and technology introduced Oda Nobunaga to matchlock guns called Tanegashima, and as you may guess, Nobunaga saw the future, his ambition, as well as the solution to his problems in those barrels. While many samurai considered guns dishonorable, Nobunaga saw their brutal efficiency and restructured his armies accordingly. With many gunners in his army, he mowed down other daimyos quickly. Even cavalry forces were no match against this volley fire, basically bringing medieval Japan into early modern warfare with this technology. In Assassin's Creed Shadows, we see Oda Nobunaga at the pinnacle of his conquest. He has his retainers beside him, the second shogun Toyotomi Hideyoshi as one of his right-hand men, and the third shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu as his ally. Oda Nobunaga stands not just as a military commander but as a fearful warlord, the unifier of Japan, and as well as the demon king of the sixth heaven. His campaign about obliterating the old world granted him the title of Demon King among his peers, but his curiosity and his wit earned him the first unification of Sengoku Jidai. It's under this banner that Yasuke, a man of African origin, became a samurai. That might sound like a fantasy twist, but it is entirely historically accurate. Although the historical records are quite limited, Assassin's Creed Shadows also brings Yasuke to the light, his loyalty to Oda Nobunaga to discussion. According to Jesuits' records, Yasuke arrived in Japan in 1579 as a servant to Alessandro Valignano, a Jesuit missionary. The descriptions of Yasuke emphasize his height, his strength, and most notably, his skin, as something the Japanese at the time had never seen before. When he arrived in Kyoto alongside Alessandro Valignano and Louis Froid, he caused such a stir that crowds gathered to see him. People climbed over each other for a glimpse. During his arrival to Kyoto, we see Yasuke, named Diogo back then, meeting with Oda Nobunaga. However, the so-called Demon King was curious. He didn't feel threatened, but he was rather impressed. The most common tale about the interaction between Oda Nobunaga and Yasuke was that his servants being ordered to clean Yasuke until he was totally clean, likely thinking that his skin was just painted. Over time, we see Yasuke being trained under Bushido, the way of the samurai, learning how to use a katana, naginata, teppo, and archery. Although these bits about Yasuke are likely fictional, we know that Yasuke wasn't just a mere servant or a worker under Nobunaga's care, but he is often called as a samurai. Nobunaga gave him a house, a katana, a Japanese name as a title that he could use, and the position of prestige. For all of these, Yasuke gave his undying loyalty. Yasuke was simply so loyal to Nobunaga that, according to historical records, he even fought alongside Nobunaga during the battle at Honno-ji, where Nobunaga met his end. Now let's talk about Naoe, the Iga clan, Nobunaga's conquest of Iga, and of course how these aspects are bound with Assassin's Creed Shadows. Being a fictional character, Naoe is built as the embodiment of what the Iga clan represented, namely independence, secrecy, and resilience in the face of an overwhelming force. Starting with the Iga province, it was one of the few regions in Japan that used to be not ruled by a traditional daimyo during the Sengoku Jidai. Located in today's Mie prefecture, Iga was governed by a confederation of jisamurai, meaning local landowning warriors, families, and shinobi houses. Basically, Iga was an independent land, an independent force, and they ruled themselves. Unlike the romanticized versions of ninjas we often see, the shinobi of Iga were masters of guerrilla warfare. They dressed up as peasants and assassinated their targets with the weapons they crafted with whatever they found on the rice fields where they worked. They sabotaged the plans of the moving armies, sabotaging their defenses, and that's exactly where Naoe fits in. Naoe is a survivor of Oda Nobunaga's brutal Iga invasion and then ambushed by the mysterious Shinbakufu, meaning the new shogunate, losing his father to a treacherous plot that would later affect both Yasuke and his master, Oda Nobunaga. Her methods of stealth, infiltration, and assassination are the embodiment of Iga's philosophy, representing the traditional way of fighting that is fading with the new technologies being brought to Japan and new adversaries plotting for their own gains. Now, this may also lead to another question: why did Nobunaga go after Iga in the first place? Basically, Oda Nobunaga saw Iga as a threat, not because it was large or wealthy, but because it was independent and defying Oda Nobunaga's order. In a time when daimyo was scrambling to unite fractured provinces, the idea of a province that governed itself, refused to bow to outsiders and even to the most fearsome warlord of that era, was intolerable. For a warlord whose ambition was to unify Japan under his rule, the Iga province was a thorn that needed to be removed. The first attempt came in 1579, led by Nobunaga's son Oda Nobukatsu, and ended in a huge embarrassment. Iga shinobi used the terrain of their homeland to their advantage. The mountains, the forests, they were all tools for their guerrilla tactics and night raids. With the first invading army humiliated and repelled, Iga stood triumphant for 2 years, until Nobunaga launched the second invasion himself, with Yasuke by his side. With Nobunaga mobilizing an estimated 40,000 troops, it was basically the purge of the Iga clan. Villages were razed, families massacred, shinobi networks were wiped out, and among this massacre was Naoe, the protagonist of Assassin's Creed Shadows, who is destined to build the creed that is left in ashes. And that leads us to the moment everything breaks apart, the betrayal that forever changes the course of Japan's history and becomes the catalyst of Assassin's Creed Shadows. The fall of Oda Nobunaga, the infamous event known as the Honno-Ji Incident. A moment so sudden, so destructive, that it brings down the Demon King himself and binds the fate of Naoe and Yasuke together, not just as enemies but as two souls forced to walk parallel paths against a far greater threat, the Shinbakufu, the new shogunate. June 21st, 1582. Nobunaga, having just suppressed uprisings and defeated most of his enemies, arrives at Honno-ji Temple in Kyoto. His forces are scattered, his sons and generals positioned across the country. Believing their enemies to be crushed, Nobunaga is on the verge of unifying Japan, and the victory feels inevitable. However, the history has a cruel sense of timing and a twist. What if Naoe, burning with hatred, was manipulated into causing Nobunaga's death herself? However, the biggest question is, why did Akechi Mitsuhide betray Oda Nobunaga? The short answer is no one really knows, and that's not an exaggeration. It is one of the most enduring mysteries of Japanese history. What we do have is a bundle of theories. Some are from Edo-era fiction and some are from Jesuit chronicles. On June 21, 1582, Nobunaga stopped to rest at Honno-ji in Kyoto, on his way to support one of his generals who will be the second shogun to unify Japan after the death of Oda Nobunaga. With the temple gates slammed shut, Akechi Mitsuhide, one of his most trusted generals, turned his army against Nobunaga, catching him off guard. As these are according to the historical reports, according to Assassin's Creed Shadows, Naoe sneaks into the Honno-ji during the battle, ambushing Oda Nobunaga and wounding him until Yasuke arrives to save his master. According to the limited historical records, Nobunaga fought Akechi Mitsuhide's men before choosing to commit seppuku, setting fire to the temple around him to prevent his adversaries from finding his body and dishonoring him. In Assassin's Creed Shadows, we experience this somewhat similar, with Nobunaga explaining how Naoe was tricked into serving Mitsuhide and then ordering Yasuke to help him commit seppuku. With Nobunaga out of the picture, Japan loses its strongest warlord and unifier, while Akechi Mitsuhide and Shinbakufu plant their roots further into Japan. And the real tragedy? We have no clear record explaining Mitsuhide's motives, no journal of justification or historical evidence. Many Edo period legends suggest Mitsuhide bore a grudge against Nobunaga, which Assassin's Creed Shadows also relied on, where Nobunaga ignored the capture and then the execution of Mitsuhide's mother being held hostage during a campaign, making Akechi Mitsuhide lose all of his trust and loyalty in his warlord. However, again, none of these theories about Nobunaga's death are supported by historical records, since most were written a century or more later as a part of fictionalized Edo period morality plays. The only verifiable theory might be minor mentions of mistreatment or disrespect from Nobunaga due to Akechi Mitsuhide's mistakes or lack of vision. What's interesting on the other hand is, for only 13 days, Akechi Mitsuhide was technically the ruler of central Japan, but he was not met with cheers. As some records say, he was seen as a traitor, a man who had murdered his lord, not with honor, but through deception. While Mitsuhide was still trying to consolidate power and legitimize his rule, news of Nobunaga's death reached the ears of Hideyoshi. The same general Nobunaga was on his way to reinforce. Hearing this, Hideyoshi didn't hesitate. As being one of the peasants who became a lord and then a general under Nobunaga's rule, Hideyoshi was aware of the political vacuum left behind, and he was also sure there were lords who would oppose his influence and power. And he was also determined to make sure that he would be the one to fill his lord's place. In just 10 days, Hideyoshi marched his forces more than 200 kilometers back from Chugoku region, which is around today's Hiroshima and Himeji Castle, all the way to Kyoto, barely stopping to rest. He secured reinforcements along the way, rallied Nobunaga loyalists, and caught Mitsuhide completely off guard. As Mitsuhide retreats from the massacre Hideyoshi caused, he was killed. Not by a rival lord, not in a duel on the battlefield, but by bandits, as he fled through the countryside with no allies, no army, and no legacy. In just 13 days, the man who orchestrated one of the greatest betrayals in Japanese history vanished from the pages of power. Through Naoe and Yasuke's efforts in Assassin's Creed Shadows case. With each target they took out, Shinbakufu left powerless and Akechi Mitsuhide without any allies to rely on. Although Shadows mostly focus on Nobunaga's Iga Invasion, Akechi Mitsuhide's betrayal, and the fall of Shinbakufu through the hands of Naoe and Yasuke, and do not focus much on Hideyoshi's rise to power and Tokugawa's final unification of Japan, I feel like I need to talk about the remaining two shoguns of Sengoku Jidai before reaching to a conclusion. But first, let me tell you a short story about these three unifiers of Japan that would help you to understand what kind of a personality they each have. In Japanese folklore, there is a famous tale used to describe the three great unifiers of Japan. The three men who brought an end to the chaotic Sengoku Jidai. And the story goes like this. Nobunaga, Hideyoshi and Tokugawa were watching a cuckoo bird. But the bird would not sing. Nobunaga says, "Little bird, if you don't sing, I will kill you." Shortly after, Hideyoshi replies, "Little bird, if you don't sing, I will make you sing." And finally, Tokugawa remarks, "Little bird, if you don't sing, I will wait for you to sing." Nobunaga's power, his will to sacrifice what's unnecessary for him, led Japan to its initial unification. That is then shaped by Hideyoshi's charm and persuasion and finalized with Tokugawa's patience and intellect. In Assassin's Creed Shadows, we don't see much of Hideyoshi's rise or Tokugawa's intellect, but when they appear, we get to see how these figures influence Sengoku Jidai and its fragile balance. Hideyoshi was once a peasant, had no noble lineage, no formal education, and no right to rule under the rigid caste system of feudal Japan. Yet, he climbed. Through Nobunaga's vision of anti-caste system, Hideyoshi started as a sandal bearer for Nobunaga and risen as one of the de facto ruler of Japan with his charm, his bantering abilities, his persuasion skills. When Hideyoshi died in 1598 and left the Toyotomi legacy in the hands of his child, that's when Tokugawa made his move as the strongest daimyo remaining, giving choice to all remaining clans to either support him or die by his blade, leading Japan to be divided into one final time between Toyotomi loyalists and Tokugawa supporters. Tokugawa saw how Jesuits tried to influence their politics and how much they were trying to lay their roots in Japan, and this, in Assassin's Creed Shadows' case, Templars supporting the Shinbakufu. This led Tokugawa to have more conservative policies against the foreigners. As he became shogun in 1603 and formed the Tokugawa shogunate, he created a government that was rigid, hierarchical, and closed the borders to the outside world as the foreign trade was restricted and Christianity was banned until the black ships arrived and forced the shogunate to open their borders in 1853. But that's a topic for another day. And so, from the smoke of gunpowder and the whispers of assassins, from the fall of Oda Nobunaga to the rise of Hideyoshi and the patience of Tokugawa Ieyasu, Assassin's Creed Shadows doesn't just explore a fragment of Japanese history, but also faces us with the real figures. Yasuke, the man who rose against the very odds, and Naoe, the shadow forged by tragedy. The Sengoku Jidai wasn't just a time of conquest, it was the moment where Japan reshaped itself forever. And through Assassin's Creed Shadows, we aren't just playing a part of a history. We are standing in it in a breathing, chaotic yet charming world. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. If there is any other title that you wish me to delve further, be sure to share them by the comments below. Any support through YouTube, join or Patreon is really appreciated, and I will see you soon in my next video.